Welcome back to another Boxscore Geeks show. Holy cow, Brian. We're kind of keeping up a tradition here in that when the offseason comes, we kind of give ourselves a moratorium. We say we're not going to be back until. Now, the one time that really bit us is we said, hey, we're not going to be back till Ben Simmons is traded. And eventually we just had to just say, nope, never mind, we're back. However, this year we were like, we're not going to be back until Damian Lillard is settled. And Brian, it's amazing. So this offseason was already super packed at the beginning. So to have an NBA offseason that essentially had a bookend, because we know that, right? The start of the offseason is where all of the excitement happens. And the advice we give to everybody is like, store this, right? Store all of the energy from this offseason now, because it's going to have to, it's going to have to get you through 2 months of NBA downtime. So to get this spectacular splash at the end of the offseason is ridiculous. And we have a lot to talk, and hopefully it will culminate in me putting it all in an article format for Substack. Basically, with a kid, summer takes a lot of time. I did a lot of traveling, but school's back. The NBA is almost back. Damian Lillard's on the move. So much to discuss.
Yeah, that's right. We had NBA Media Day today. Training camp is opening this week. And of course, the WNBA finals are about to start. So we are back in hoop season, Dre. We are back.
And I mean, one of these years I'm going to get, the WNBA having the split ticket MVP vote. Simple argument I've made is like, it's for any league more than 5 teams, even one MVP isn't enough. This is one of those cases where baseball, because of their stupid antiquated rules, has it right. Baseball has, an American and National League, which whatever. This is where they have it right, where, they basically have MVPs on each side. And then they even split it one further, right? Where they have like offensive positions, the Cy Young. So, all the sports need to do that because, there were multiple MVPs in the WNBA this season. I argue every year, there are multiple MVPs, except for last year. It just should have been Jokic. But, if there'd been a Western Conference MVP and an Eastern Conference MVP, Jokic and Embiid both get one and we can all be happy. So that's where we should go. Now, Brian, this gets bizarre. I'm going to cheat and throw you the ball first. What are your thoughts on how the Damian Lillard saga kind of ended in Portland?
It's funny because the dialogue around it from the outside this whole time was about Miami, right? He wanted to go to Miami. That's where he didn't want to go anywhere else. And then other teams jumped in at the end. And eventually he goes to the Bucks, right? And yeah, I think this is one of those we've seen situations where teams wait and kind of get screwed if they wait too long. Well, we were talking about the Pac-12 conference dissolving because they waited too long on their media deal, right? But waiting seemed to be good for the Portland Trailblazers here because they didn't take any of those deals, centered around Tyler Hero, who we're not huge fans of here compared to the players they got. It ended up working out. Well, we'll talk about it briefly, but they got many first-round draft picks, 2 solid players, and yeah, I think this is probably the best deal they could have gotten in.
And the other thing about this that I think is really important is the Damian Lillard wanting out, and then the kind of jokey point where he almost George Costanza it. So essentially, Damian Lillard and his agent, for those that weren't following, which would be bizarre because it's like the only NBA news for about 2 months, was they were basically saying Miami or bust. Yep. Trade us to Miami or bust. Now, here's the problem. I would have probably been okay with Bam. That's still rough, right? Because you're going to have to replace his production.
I don't think he was available, though.
But that's the point. Is the only 2 assets Miami had were Bam and Jimmy Butler, in my opinion. And of course, you can't trade either of those because you're basically looking for Lillard to augment your core. Now, like I said, I could see trying to do something with Bam and then replacing a center because like players like Rob Williams were available. But that's the point, is the only players, if I were looking at a trade with Miami, I'd go, is Bam available? Let's even do a quick look from last year. But, is Bam available? Is Jimmy Butler available? And of course, Miami rightfully would go, are you out of your mind? And you just laugh and go, no. I mean, in fact, Miami is ridiculous last year, wherein this is just a good point. Jimmy Butler was worth 18 wins produced. When I was just talking about having multiple MVPs, really the MVP should have been Jokic from the West, Jimmy Butler from the East. And of course, we did wind up that correctly in the playoffs, right? Where they got the Larry Bird and Magic Johnson awards. But Jimmy Butler is worth 18 wins produced in the regular season. Next best, Kyle Lowry with 4.7. Like, this was not a team that had any, this was Jimmy Butler and not much else. And we legitimately did have Jimmy Butler put on a Michael Jordan show. I think that Bam was probably injured because that does not align with his normal production. His normal production is he is a pretty good center. Ironically, this will get me in trouble. He's about a Joel Embiid level center normally. Last year, he wasn't that good. I think he was probably coming back from injury, like the tell being over 2,000 minutes in 2020, over 2,000 minutes in 2021, under 2,000 minutes in 2022, over 2,000 minutes last year. But that's the point, is if you're coming back from an injury season, you're not as productive. So really, the Heat just did not have anything. And so that's what's funny is I can't tell if these talking heads about this after the fact are being serious, but when they're just like, Miami, didn't do much after the fact, I'm just like, Miami didn't have anything. And we knew this, right? And exactly what you said, the like just waiting can bite you. The flip side is going, if someone's telling you have to do something, a really good negotiation thing to keep in mind is no is always an option. I'm sorry, as much as I would have loved to see Damian Lillard next to, well, anybody, but next to Jimmy Butler in particular, Miami just didn't have anything. And I mean, I've been wicked impressed with how Miami keeps, staying in finals contention despite the fact that, stars leave and stuff, but they just didn't. I was wicked surprised about Milwaukee. I'm going to throw a rumor I heard, which makes me sad because it hurts one of my heroes. It hurts Giannis, because allegedly one of the reasons this trade went down as quietly as it did. And again, this might all just be wrestling. This might be kayfabe. This might be just stuff that people are making up for clicks because it's still the offseason. But Giannis really loves Drew Holiday. And allegedly they didn't want Giannis to know Drew was on the block because they didn't want to upset him. And a rumor is, in the past, apparently Milwaukee was going to offer Drew Holiday up for Jimmy Butler and asked Giannis, and he vetoed it. And this makes it really rough because one of my classic takes has been the Milwaukee Bucks have not done enough around Giannis Antetokounmpo. Sorry, Seth Partnow, when you were on staff, either you gave bad advice or they didn't listen to you. Letting Malcolm Brogdon walk has always been a contentious point for me. The fact that the Bucks only have one title, despite the fact that they've had a transcendent talent, they've only had, one title and one finals run, is ridiculous. And a semi-competent front office. Now, even with my dig at Seth Partnow there, who is a analyst that, we've had back and forth with about wages of wins, I candidly think that he probably gave them better advice and they just didn't take it. That's the MO. Because even if I don't think he's as good of an analyst as anybody from the wins produced era is, I do think that he definitely probably gave better advice and was just ignored. So I've basically been like, the Bucks front office is not doing enough around Giannis, and it's egregious. If it's true that Giannis said no to Jimmy Butler for Drew Holiday, I'm actually going to have to take a step back and just be like, Giannis, this is tough, but I'm actually going to have to say maybe I'm not as mad as I should be. Maybe I'm more mad than I should be at the Bucks front office. But on the flip side, that's part of the allegedness of why this trade was so quiet, is that they basically had to make sure it was complete because they didn't want it to get out that Drew was on the block. But if that's true, that worked out well. And I mean, this is a tough one. I'm going to cheat and do it again, Brian. What do you think? Did the Bucks win this trade, or is it a little more nuanced?
It's tough. I can't say they won it outright. Drew Holiday is really good. I'm a big fan of his. So here's the thing: they changed the kind of player they have as a point guard, right? Drew Holiday, probably one of the best defensive guards in the league. Really good on offense too, and just a great all-star level player. But Lillard's the opposite, right? He's all offense and no defense. So for the Bucks, when you have Giannis as your cornerstone, who's, more like Drew Holiday, one of the best defensive players in the league, also great on offense, but more of a well-rounded player. It's interesting. Maybe that's the way to go. The Bucks, though, again, if we're just talking about reading the tea leaves, the story of Giannis having some discontent came out in the media not that long before this trade went down, right? And what it said was basically Giannis is not going to sign his extension. He's going to wait a little bit, and he's not sure if Milwaukee's committed to winning, basically, right? So even if Drew Holiday is his guy, did they have to make some kind of a deal to keep Giannis happy? Like, so that's my question. Does this deal fall within his criteria of improving the team or not? And I think we know the answer to this. It doesn't matter what Giannis thinks of this trade right now. What matters is how the team does, right? If Lillard ends up being hurt or things go south, then Giannis may still ask for a trade anyway. But of course, if they go back to the finals, then things will be looking good in Milwaukee.
Well, I think that's the funny thing is I think it's the other way around. Is that
Oh,
I think that that was actually what got them Drew Holiday, and this is what keeps
that's
happening with
true.
the
Yeah.
Bucks is that the Bucks will not do enough. Giannis will start saying he's upset, and then they'll like be like, "Oh crap, we got to do something," and that's why they picked up Drew Holiday, and it worked out, of course. And I could see the same with Lillard, where it's going like, "This is what it takes to get his extension." And the funny thing is, even looking at the Bucks, and so like Drew Holiday took a big jump coming to Milwaukee. Like, and it was funny because early in Philadelphia, he was a Hinkie trade, and when he was traded by Hinkie to New Orleans, what was funny is that after the fact, it came out that he was more injured than was known. And so for about like the first half of his career, he did look really beat up. And then in New Orleans, he actually started looking like he was actually kind of productive. And then after that, he just has turned into like a really good player. Now, the only thing that scares me is just the possibility that he's injured and older. But it's rough because his ceiling, and we'll go by 2021, actually 2022, 10.2 wins produced, 2.22 wins per 48, which is really good. But from kind of the box score geeks, the Brian and Dre star criteria. For those that don't know, the Dre star, this might change a little, is usually about 10 wins produced in a regular season, and the Brian star is 200 times as good as an average player. Now, what you'll notice though is Drew just hits that 200, whereas at his peak, the best season that Damian Lillard had was 2020, where he was about 300 wins per 48. Yipes. And last season, he was 260. So, like, if we're looking at a batter, right? Drew Holiday's a 200 hitter. Damian Lillard's a 260 hitter. Don't have to tell you there's a big difference. And something that also came out that we all know, right, is Damian Lillard only got 11.1 wins last season. But turns out at the end of the season, Portland shut him down with an injury. And after the fact, he's like, yeah, he was basically asked to be injured to tank. And this is always funny. And I really want to take this brief off ramp to talk about a point, which is like the loyalty point. Because for a decade now, Damian Lillard has been the poster boy of loyalty in the NBA, right? When Kevin Durant changes teams, when LeBron James changes teams, right? When stars are demanding trades, people go, whatever happened to the good old days? And what they miss, by the way, is the good old days were not players were more loyal. It's that the rules were much more stringent and did not allow player movement. So anytime someone's it's the exact, like, it's so the United States MO when they're like, things used to be better. And you're like, when there was slavery, when there was segregation, like that's what you're talking about. Like the specific thing you are missing is that. So is that what you miss? So when people are going, the NBA used to be better when players were more loyal, and you're like, it used to be better when players were paid less and had less control. Is that really what made the NBA better? Is that really what you miss? So, but Damian Lillard has been the poster boy of loyalty, right? He's going to stick with Portland even if he doesn't win a title. And look how quickly everything turned when he started getting a little upset and asked for a thing out. And it's like all the goodwill of him being the poster boy just disappeared in an instant, right? Like him wanting to go someplace else. And then also discovering, right, that he basically left individual accolades, like all-time career points, etc., things that might actually impact all NBA voting by sitting for 11 games. He left that on the table to help the team and then gets to the end and it's basically like doesn't matter, right? You're just an asset. Now, the good news, in my opinion, is I think Lillard ended up in a fantastic position, right? He ended up on a good team next to one of the top 5 players in the NBA, I would argue. And probably especially with what Boston's been doing and my belief that Philadelphia can't stay healthy or cohesive, probably in a great spot to make a finals. So ended up in the best situation he could have. But it does really like highlight a lot of how all of the goodwill a player amasses in their career will vanish an instant when you get too old. Like another player I'll throw out is like Steve Francis. Steve Francis is one of my favorites. Damian Lillard now is one of my favorite. And I'm gonna have to think of like an old player, but just like your franchise will turn on you when you get old, when you get malcontent, or when a better player comes along.
Yeah, and I have to add in a piece of this story that came in recently was that apparently when things were falling apart with the Miami deal after weeks and weeks of wrangling, Lillard went to Portland and said, "You know what? If we can't go to Miami, I want to rescind my trade request. I want to stay on the Bucks." I'm sorry, on Portland. And Portland said, "Nope, sorry, Dame, we're trading you." And then they didn't talk to him for 3 days, and then they shipped him out.
Yeah,
So
and what is rough about that though is I actually kind of even agree with that.
sure,
I don't know how much you read Cora. Cora for me is I don't know if
every
this
once in a
metaphor
while.
I don't know if this metaphor is going to land, but it really feels like penthouse letters for HR scenarios. Like, dear Cora, you'll never believe what happened to me. I had a 10x employee that used to show up 5 minutes late to their shift, and I got really upset. And then they went off and founded Google. Was this the right decision or whatever? Right? Or they'll say, I have a 10x employee that shows up 5 minutes late, and I'm considering firing him. Is that the right decision? And the answer is, let me tell you about an employee I had. That employee used to show up 5 minutes late, and I fired them. That employee was Sergey Brin. My mistake. Like, that kind of BS. But something that does show up common in Quora, and then even I've seen in like just HR chatter, is that the second an employee is like, I got another offer. Should I go get my current employee to match it? And they're just like, you're gone. Like not you're gone as in you're fired. They're basically going like, you're not going to work there anymore. Like either you'll take the offer and you'll quit in the near future, you'll take the offer and your company is going to wait a few months and fire you. Like whatever has happened in that relationship between you and your employer, it is fractured, it is over, just leave. And so I don't actually fault Portland for that part, for just being like, look it, you just demanded a trade, and I'm not a child. Like with how the agent news went out, with how all of the stuff was getting spread, it was very clear. Even if Lillard didn't okay it, his agent was clearly going out there and saying Lillard's not going to sign with any team but Miami. Lillard wants Miami. That was such an obvious like PR job that from Portland's standpoint, it's going, you clearly want out. You already did this once. We can't have it happen again. Now, I could probably say that given the years that Damian Lillard has given them, they could have probably been nicer. And I don't believe, like, that's one thing that I never like is when we watch front offices get in fights with players like Horace Grant or Shaquille O'Neal, and then basically it's going like, even if you guys got mad at each other, they did a lot for you. You can still be gracious and thankful, and it comes off ahead. But that being said, Portland, let's do the full haul. I think I'm going to see if I can find a tweet because this has been done a bunch. But basically, Portland got, I think, what, Drew Holiday, Malcolm Brogdon, Robin Williams III. Did Grayson Allen end up on them, or was that another team?
Grayson Allen went to the Suns, I think. Actually, I'm not sure.
I mean, okay, so
We've got it here, though.
Kevin O'Connor says this on October 1st. Blazers haul for Damian Lillard. And I'm not, he says also, this, I guess they had to ship out Nasir Little and Keon Johnson, which, bye. DeAndre Ayton, holy cow. Rob Williams. Now that is amazing because now here's what's funny. That is like a Super Saiyan combination of a perfect center, right? Like all rebounds, all offense, one center. Love it. Malcolm Brogdon. Okay, so they didn't get Grayson Allen. Tomani Kamara. I haven't looked up their numbers. I'll have to check it. And then basically 5 picks. Now, my personal opinion is those picks mean very little as improvement, but that is now future asset. So it's like
one of them is a Warriors pick, so that's basically a second round pick.
2024 this year. Now,
and another one's 2029 also.
Yeah, but
6
I mean,
years.
the good news is it's like they basically got a bunch of gift cards that they can use in the future, and that's my point is I do not like draft picks as let's refill the roster. I don't mind them as let's take a flyer and see if this player becomes good. And you have to do that with a lot of players or multiple, but they're also money that you can use in trade. So that's how I like to view draft picks. So it's basically going, the Blazers really got 3 of 5 of a starting lineup. Now I'm just going to have to look up. I hope I'm saying the name right. Kamara.
Yeah. I don't
Okay.
know anything about Kamara, though. I've never seen him
Yeah.
play.
Let's see. All right. But I mean, Brogdon, Williams, Ayton, that's 2 starting. And I mean, this is where it gets really weird with Rob Williams. We've talked him a lot because we are huge favorites of him around here. It seemed blatantly obvious to me that he cannot play a full game, because it's easy to look at the playoffs last year and go like, what on earth were the Celtics thinking? Why was he not playing more? And it's like, the Celtics are not going to come out, especially since we just saw him trade him, and say Rob Williams is even more beat up than we thought and we can't play him. Rob Williams doesn't want that because that affects his contract and tradability. The Celtics don't want it, but it's like too obvious. But something that I've always been interested in is, kind of like the idea of like a relief pitcher in baseball, or baseball even has pitchers like this, where it's kind of going, they're on a pitch count, they're on like an 80 pitch count. The average pitcher is 100. And so like if you have a pitch on an 80 pitch count, yeah, well, sure, maybe they can only go 4 innings, but if they're a really good pitcher, they get you through 4 and you go to your relievers. So like I I honestly think that Portland is in really a fantastic spot now with what they've got to, just keep going. With Damian Lillard gone, they now have, Brogdon, Ayton, and that's really good. And, Drew Holiday wouldn't have been bad to keep around. And that's this is very similar to the Wizards when they traded Chris Paul, for Chris Paul rather. And I kind of went, you did a good trade, but I don't believe you're not going to do it. And so when Portland, their first trade was, they shipped out Damian Lillard and they got back Ayton and Drew Holiday. And I basically went, that is fantastic. That is on its own is fantastic, right? You've basically got a guard, not as good as Lillard, but still very good, and you just got a really good center. And Nurkic is really tough for me because I actually think he's really productive, but he's been really beat up and was bad last season. So it's kind of going, are you going to hope that Nurkic bounces back, or are you just going to take a center that had a good year last year? And I mean, it really makes me sad just how much Ayton gets hated on for a couple bad playoff games, because he is a really good player. Although interestingly enough, last year he was bad. Maybe he was beat up. I don't know. He had a weird last year. I mean, he was really good as a rookie. He had a bad year as a sophomore. He was clearly injured. Really good his third and fourth year. Bad year last year. But I mean, he was still better than Nurkic last year and is still young. So it's like, I am 100% on board. But then I heard rumblings that they were going to trade Drew Holiday and was kind of going, what's going to happen? Are they just going to ship him out for picks? They actually got good assets back. But now I'm worried on the flip side going, now there's rumblings, as you said, that they're going to ship out Brogdon. So what are they going to get in exchange for Brogdon? Because I think Portland has a roster that can compete now. And I don't know if they believe that.
Oh, I don't think they do at all. They're saying Scoot Henderson, that's our guy now. He's who we're building the team around. They also have other young, guards and wings. They've got Shaden Sharp. Everyone likes Anthony Simons as well. Those guys, we'll see what they can do. But yeah, well, then of course Ayton and Rob Williams, they want to keep both of them and play them. I think they want to do what you said, have Rob Williams be the backup. They're probably suspicious about how many minutes he can play. Yeah, I think they're gonna keep tanking, Dre. I'm sorry to say, I don't think Portland is trying to win.
Well, what's funny is another kind of tangential rumor to all of this, and if it's true, makes me sad as well, is the Toronto Raptors. So, of course, the biggest name was the Miami Heat, right? Basically, Lillard wants to go to Miami, and everybody, us included, that would spend longer than 5 seconds looking at Miami's roster would go like, if Portland does that, they're fucking morons, especially because if Portland had traded to Miami with the hopes of like future draft picks, it's going, Miami always inexplicably ends up in the playoffs and in the finals. You don't want their draft pick, right? So it was very apparent that sure, Lillard can do this media blitz to go to Miami. And we understand it, play with Riley, play with Jimmy Butler, but it's not happening. And then of course the flip side is like Toronto came out and was, everybody was just like, well, Toronto's got assets. Toronto's got all these young players. Toronto's going to get them. It made sense. And I hear that OG Anunoby was the sticking point. And if that's the
Mm.
case, I'm just like, what? Oh, did you hear that or did you not hear that?
No, that's what I heard. That basically what made this happen was Lillard came in and said, you know, I would consider a few other teams like Milwaukee Bucks, and there's one other I think I'm not sure if it's the Raptors. This sort of contradicts the thing I said previously about him retracting his trade request. So I don't know the timeline on that. It's possible that that happened before he retracted the trade request, but anyway.
Yeah, it's hard to know, but yeah, it's kind of what I always want to give a little bit of leeway because even when we are critical of teams that do not make trades and we go, what were you thinking? We don't know what happened behind closed doors and we don't know what the sticking point was. But if Portland was willing to ship Lillard to Toronto and they basically said, give us, of course, you keep Scotty Barnes, the greatest Scotty to ever play basketball, right? That's right, Pippen. I'm going at you. You're being way too petty. I think Pippen is obviously, to be clear, I think Pippen is one of the most underrated and greatest players in NBA history. But he ended up on the NBA top 50. Michael Jordan always talks him up. He did get accolades. So it's kind of going at this point. Scottie Pippen is just too many sour grapes after the fact for me to give him much credit. Holy cow. Okay, this I missed, by the way. So I'm looking at CBS Sports for transaction. So I want to look at the Phoenix Suns. I'll finish up my thought there first. But basically, Toronto had a shot at Lillard, didn't really go for him. And if that's the case, I feel they made a mistake. Would just be the 2 cents. But I think Portland really got a lot out of this, and I'm still scared as to what they're doing. But I recall actually that Toronto, when Masai came in, that one of his assistant GMs came out and said their plan was to tank. And what happened is they started trading away their stars like Bargnani. They didn't do DeRozan. They used to have three? It was Bargnani, DeRozan, and one other, but I forget. They shipped two or three of them out. And then
This is after Kawhi, you're saying? Because Kawhi was a star.
this was before Kawhi.
Oh,
So
before
basically,
Kawhi. Okay.
Masai comes in and is like, okay, well, we're going to start tanking. So we're going to get rid of Bargnani, right? Because, oh my God, we're going to lose our star. And shocker, they got better. And they had some like good players. I think like Vucevic was one. And they started winning. And they were like, wait a minute. What if instead of blowing it up, we just keep the roster? And then, of course, they finally flipped DeRozan into Kawhi. And there you go. And it was like, when you read it when we were watching it, we were like, holy cow, this front office gets it. And then after the fact, it almost seems like an accident. And it almost seems like that with Portland, where we just keep watching them make good trade after good trade. And I'm like, oh my God, are they going to do it? Are they going to just rebuild in place around Lillard and actually have a playoff team next season? And then they're still, if they keep trying to tank after all this, I don't know what to tell you. So that's kind of funny.
Yeah, I think that's what. Oh, yeah. It's just real briefly. That's what led to them to do this trade? I think after all this whole saga went through, is if you're if you're not gonna try to win a title right now, then you should probably trade Lillard because you're not gonna have another chance to get a haul for him. This is your only chance to get a haul for him, I think.
Well, and it just keeps going down, right? Like
Yes.
any team that is smart that goes, unless we need him this season to win, unless it's a Clyde Drexler, interestingly enough, another Portland Trailblazer, unless it's a Clyde Drexler scenario, we wait till the offseason. And unless you are James Dolan, one of the worst owners of all time, who overrode his general manager to trade for Carmelo Anthony well before he needed to, it's just not going to happen. So, agreed. And I mean, it just wound up great. Now, I want to wrap up the Bucks and we'll do the Suns, and then we'll see where we go from there. The Bucks are fascinating because I think the reality is, if we look at total wins, Drew Holiday and Grayson Allen going out the door for Damian Lillard is a net loss. But what we've always looked at the NBA is that it is a two-part system. The regular season is a marathon. The playoffs are a sprint. And what happens is, in the regular season, you can have a really deep bench. This was the San Antonio Spurs forever. But come the playoffs, the term that I really like that Andrew Sutton used on this show was, you have to have a spade. You have to have high spades. It's a trump game, right? So you have to have high spades. So you have to have Jimmy Butler and Nikola Jokic, the top two players in the NBA, are the reason their respective teams went to the finals, even though they are arguably weaker than some of the other teams, at least top to bottom. Although the Nuggets top six was pretty freaking strong because a lot of the team constructions, like Klay Thompson as an example, just had glaring holes. Dylan, I forgot we might have to talk about Dylan Brooks, and we missed the Olympics, Brian. Probably should have talked that, or not the Olympics,
The
the
World
internet
Championship or
world
whatever it's
championship.
called.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we missed that. So is what it is. These top teams would just have a glaring hole. So the Nuggets had two things going for them. They were healthy and they had a good top six. But so the playoffs really having better top players that can go full burn matters a lot. So basically being able to play, if they do it, Giannis and wishful thinking, Giannis and Damian Lillard 40 minutes a game in the playoffs matters arguably more than if you had two players that were arguably an aggregate worth more than Jimmy Butler. So I'm going by an old Jeff Van Gundyism when he was talking about the Tracy McGrady trade to the Houston Rockets. And I I don't know if I've ever seen one, or at least can't easily think of a trade that does not follow this mantra, which is in the NBA, whichever team gets the best player wins the trade. And you can give some caveats, right? Like it has to be for a good player. I'm okay saying most trades in the NBA don't matter. Sorry. If you are trading for a star caliber player, whatever team gets the best star caliber player in the trade wins the trade.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that's what I go back and forth with on this trade is how likely, this is what we were talking about earlier, right? How likely is Lillard to be better for the Bucks, than Brogdon and Drew Holiday? I guess Drew for the most part, right? I think it's more than 50-50, but it's not 100%, and it's probably a lot closer to 50-50. So it's a theoretically good deal, but I'm not sold 100%. I'll put it that way.
Well, yeah, I mean, also just it's a lot of wishful thinking. What I want to look up really quick is your point, right? So Giannis, okay, the situation, they got some time. So Giannis has 2 years left on his contract and a player option in 2025, 26. I do not know the point at which he is allowed to resign. So I could basically see, and let's take a look. Damian Lillard, right, just signed his extension too. That's the other thing
Yeah.
everybody was noting is that
Yeah.
it's so funny. Like, I've seen players do this. I'm trying to think of other ones where Embiid actually, right? Like Embiid was starting to have demands of the 76ers, and it's going, holy cow, Damian Lillard. Good God. He signed for 4 seasons with 2027 being a player option. And he's still set to make $200,000 or 200,000. That'd be something. 200 million. So basically, Damian Lillard in his career thus far has made $230 million. And his next 4 years, he's going to make just as much. Good God. Um, so yeah, I mean, Lillard is signed for 4 years. Giannis is on for 2 years. I think having Lillard on does help a lot to just ensure Giannis is going to resign.
That's the idea.
Here's the hope. Okay, let's get to, actually we got 2 teams left, Brian. We got Phoenix and Boston, and Boston is the most fascinating to me, but let's get to Phoenix. So Phoenix, I'm using CBS Sports for all of the recent transactions. So there are 4 players that they wound up with as a result of this. So they got Keon Johnson, Yusuf Nurkic, Nasir Little, and Grayson Allen. Now here's the bad news. Based on last year's numbers, the only one of those players that is any good was Grayson Allen, he's young, he's good, and he's cheap. So Grayson Allen, great pickup. Now they basically flipped Ayton into Nurkic, and I am conflicted on this, as I mentioned, just because Ayton was younger and pretty good, and Nurkic had a pretty bad season last year, and Nurkic was clearly injured last season because Nurkic only got 1,350 minutes, and Nurkic has only hit 2,000 minutes once in his career. Like Nurkic keeps getting beat up, and this is something that we bring up all the time about players, which is player gets injured, and you're like, that player comes back, they can help the squad. And that player gets injured again. You're like, if that player can come back, they can help the squad. And eventually, they turn into Derrick Rose or Tracy McGrady, where you're just like, I'm sorry, I don't know if I can believe him. And I'm worried that Nurkic is getting to that point because it'll basically be like 2,000 minutes. I can't believe he has been on Portland this long. People have been saying that about LeBron James in LA. And same thing. It seems like just yesterday that Nurkic was on the Denver Nuggets. And holy cow, It's 2023 and he's been on Portland for like 8 years. Where does time go, Brian? But yeah, Nurkic like 2,000 minutes in 2018, 2019, then boom, only 200 minutes in 2020, then 800 minutes in 2021. So Ooch got injured. 2022 finally gets back up to 1,500 minutes, but not as good as he's been. And last year, only 1,300 minutes and not. So my fear is the thought was Nurkic is a more defensive minded center, which is what that team needs. Because, of course, with Bradley Beal,
Oh, I'm against you on that one.
Oh, really?
I
Okay, so
I
what?
I do not like Nurkic's defense.
Oh, okay. So
I'm
you're going to agree
concerned.
with You're going to agree with mainstream, which I think I'm inclined to. Like his defense is reputation based, right?
Well, I don't like. I mean, he rebounds, but yeah, the numbers aren't great on his
Yeah.
offense or
Well,
defense.
in 2017, he was getting 17 rebounds, 3 blocks, 2 steals on 6 personal fouls, which isn't bad per 48. That's like you can play him the full 48, and he's going to get you some great defensive numbers. Those numbers have exactly what I just said. He's been declining, and I think that's a thing that happens. And I think I like that you actually have a much more astute eye for this, which is as players start getting injured, parts of their game usually get chipped away at. And I think that's the thing is that players that were defensive stoppers in their prime, they lose a step or two and they're not a defensive stopper, even if they're still getting all the votes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm worried about the Suns. Yeah, so I'm sure some fans would say, well, Aiton was sketchy on defense either. He never quite got there. Yeah, but he is a lot younger and he had some potential. Nurkic, yeah, I'm worried about his defense. And then going from Chris Paul, who's yes older, but then you're gonna put Bradley Beal at point guard defensively, who's played like small forward even recently. I'm a little bit worried about that as well. Durant, of course, is great on defense, but he's older too and needs to, conserve his energy for scoring. I'm worried about the Suns' defense overall. Booker's also an offensive player, of course, and
Yeah.
they've lost a lot of their defensive-minded players. They might have Torrey Craig still, but he's getting older and doesn't play as many minutes. Yeah,
And
yeah, I'm worried about the
they
Suns.
picked up what Eric Gordon. So I mean, yeah, this team in
Grayson
general.
Allen, not a defender either.
So yeah, all of Grayson Allen's stats come from offense. Okay, so yeah, and it's like, and that's what you don't. I mean, that was what made Bradley Beal such a weird pickup. Is you're going, all right, in the most favorable terms to the box score geeks, we can do we could be nice, right, Brian? Occasionally,
Beal's improved a lot.
Beal's an above average, decent player. He's not worth the contract, but fine, he can help out a team. That being said, he was 100% not what the Suns needed. You basically go, you have a younger, better version of that player on your roster already. Like you already have Devin Booker. Why do you want a worse Devin Booker to go next to Devin Booker when you also have a Kevin Durant? Like, and then to the point of like, okay, well maybe we need to get some defense. Let's get Nurkic. It's like, yeah, 2017 Nurkic, and yeah, it'd be interesting to go back in time, Brian, and have that argument. I think was a good defender based on like, and I'm doing very cursory glancing, so I'm not 100% sure. I don't. I 100% agree with you, right? Like the when the explicit box score statistics for defense are not there, it is very hard for me to believe that the implicit ones are there, right? If Nurkic can't rebound as well as an average center, why am I going to believe that he is a stopper? And like one not even exception, but one point I will give you is if you look at say Brook Lopez, and we've had some discussions here with Brook Lopez on the Bucks. And me thinking he's overpaid and not worth it. And we had a lot of back and forth, and you actually got me to flip a little, where it's just kind of like the Bucks, basically they needed to resign Brook Lopez. They paid market rate, and he is good enough. And now with like Lillard, it's like, yeah, all Brook Lopez needs to do is basically keep people out of the paint. Let Giannis get all the rebounds. All Lopez needs to do is keep people out of the paint, and it seems like he is able to do that, and his numbers reflect that, right? Like Lopez gets a lot of blocks. So it's like, I will believe that Brook Lopez has the defensive stopping abilities that are wanted from him because he has the explicit stats that go along with it. So if you tell me that Brook Lopez is a rim stopper, whatever the term you'd want to use, I'll believe you because the numbers are there. If you try and tell me Nurkic is bringing defense to the team, and I look and I'm like, 2017 Nurkic maybe, but not the current Nurkic, that's where we're at. So I'm I'm inclined to agree with you about the Suns. I think they're a lot weaker than people perceive. I am if I get a chance before the season starts, if I travel or whatever to a place with betting, I do think I want to parlay an under on the Suns under and the Celtics under. Um, I am excited that the Suns picked up Bol, but then they also picked up Eric Gordon. It's just like the Suns as a whole, they're banking on Kevin Durant staying healthy, and I just don't think I can. I don't have enough faith. He's pretty old and beat up too.
No, that's what it is. Without Chris Paul, they're very, very dependent on Kevin Durant. Um, we'll see if Devin Booker and or Bradley Beal can play point guard at all. But in the past, it hasn't always gone that well. So we'll see.
All right, Brian. Let's end it if I can look silly. That's the hope, right? Because this happened a couple times now. I'm gonna come out against the Boston Celtics, and I got to give a shout out to Chris Ye, who it's funny. Like it's really funny when you're not active on social media for the day, and you get the news before it. So basically, I got a text from Ben Guest, and I got Chris Ye tweeted at me. So before I got a chance to look through the feed, so I knew about this and like had the take. And one thing that makes me mad is I think I want to write about this, but I think Chris really nailed this trade in like a tweet, which is ridiculous. So he said, either the Celtics are morons or they know something about Robert Williams' injury situation that we don't. Drew is an upgrade over Brogdon, but that is far outweighed by ending up with an injury-prone old bad 5 rotation of Horford and Porzingis. Like that's my agreement here. The Celtics are baffling me in that, like I said, my advice is to bet the under. Now, what it's worth saying, I said to bet the under last year. And the logic was pretty sound in that based on their SRS, based on Rob Williams' performance, based on the fact that Rob Williams was injured and wasn't going to be healthy at the start of the season, I basically thought the Celtics were going to suffer at the start of the season. Rob Williams was going to be healthy. They were going to go into the playoffs pretty strong, which kind of did happen. But what really happened is like Tatum remembered that he was an MVP caliber player. And we've had speculations that he might have had long COVID and this might be the first season he was healthy because his progression right up into COVID looked like an up and coming star. And then he just kind of meandered for a year or two after COVID. And he was one of the first people to get it. So who freaking knows? So that happened last year. But what the Celtics done this year is they gave a big contract to Jaylen Brown, who we think is fine, but that's overpaid. And even in discussing it, what we kind of said is, well, they overpaid Jaylen Brown, but they actually do have some good players, Rob Williams included. That's still kind of true, right? Because they have what? They have Drew Holiday, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, but now we're getting into trouble because they have Kristaps Porzingis and Al Horford, which, as Chris Ye pointed out, are older and weaker. And I can't remember if this made the show, Brian. I think were we talking this pre-show, the Waffle House comparison?
Oh yeah, that was pre-show.
Yeah, I definitely want to use this. So what's really funny about Kristaps Porzingis to me is people are like bringing up win shares numbers. And what is really important when we look at the modern state of advanced analytics, which are still stuck in 2006, good news, the stats in 2006 were still good enough to be used now. Bad news is people didn't use them right in 2006 and they still don't use them right now. But in 2006, you had a bunch of analysts kind of eyeballing numbers. Like Dean Oliver eyeballed the values he wanted for box score statistics for win shares in 2006. Now, Dave Barry, inventor of wins produced, did a very wise thing, which is he basically said the NBA is a zero-sum league. As this is not shocking that a professor made this intuition, right? Have to grade to the curve, right? And that makes complete sense. It does not matter if you are the best if you are one of the top 100 basketball players to ever play the game of basketball, if 99 of those players are in this year's NBA, you are not a good player. And so that's the problem. A lot of the old stats, win shares, BPM, were a human setting the values that they wanted to make sure that the players they wanted looked right. Now, the good news is box score statistics are very consistent year to year in basketball and do account for winning. So if you have a box score metric that somewhat links to a point margin, that is probably a half decent metric. But that being said, the numbers that people explicitly set to make sure that scoring was rewarded. And as an example, I don't know about BPM V2 because it's more opaque than BPM V1. But something BPM V1 would do. BPM is a stat that you can find over at Basketball Reference. It's basically a bastardized wins produced that's done worse, which
It
is
stands
funny.
for box plus minus.
Which doesn't, and there are so many plus minus metrics that are not plus minus metrics. They are regressed on point margin. But
yeah.
Anyway, but that being said, one thing the creator did is that they basically used 3-point attempts, not makes, 3-point attempts as positive. And part of that is to basically help, outside shooters look better. But that's ridiculous because you could have two players. I remember looking at this. I remember looking at Paul Millsap versus Dwight Howard and going, why on earth does Paul Millsap look better via BPM than Dwight Howard? And I realized Paul Millsap takes a lot of threes. Now he shoots below league average at threes, but he takes more threes than Dwight Howard. That's why he's better. But if you have a metric that was pinned to the values of 2007, it just doesn't line up with the modern NBA. So Kristaps Porzingis, I will agree. If Kristaps Porzingis went back into 2006 and put up the numbers he does in the modern NBA, he would be an above average player. But in the modern NBA, he is a below average player. In the modern NBA, like Kobe Bryant has a career average of 55.6% true shooting. True shooting, for those that don't know, is a metric that factors in free throws, 3-point shots, 2-point attempts, normalizes them to basically assume what is the average number of points you would get on any given shot if it's normalized for type of shot. And so 55.6 would be like 1.12, which would actually be very good for most of Kobe's career. That was above average when Kobe was a player. That is below league average now. So same point. Kristaps Porzingis, his shooting efficiency as a big would have been good for a big in 2006, and it is not now. And there was a weird internet thing going on, which is people saying, do Waffle House employees deserve to be paid $25 an hour, which would be about $50,000 a year. And what we were noting back and forth is like modern stats say that for California, and you were saying it's even worse in other parts of California, but in California, if you make below $70,000, you're considered below the poverty line. And you were saying there are other parts of California it's even worse than that. So it's going, people have this number pinned from like 2002 about what a good salary is, $25 an hour. And it's going, with inflation with modern US, that is not a good number. And the same is true with some of the players on the Celtics now. So when people are going, wow, the Celtics are looking really good with Kristaps Porzingis, I just am baffled going like, he is not a good player in the modern NBA. He would have been good when win shares was created in the early 2000s. He is not good now in 2023 when every player in the NBA knows how to shoot good from three.
Yeah, he needs to be judged at a higher level, right? Because of the position he plays. If he shooted well, he shot whatever. If he shot the way he did and he was a different position, then that would be great. But he's a center, and he also, he's fine as a rebounder and rim protector, but he's not great. Considering his size, he has concerns as being a switchable defender on the perimeter because he is legitimately over 7 feet tall. And the injury question is a concern too. And he's not that young guy anymore. He's now, getting to be an older player. So it's a risk. What Boston is saying is they're going away from Rob Williams, who, also a big injury concern, but he's a defensive specialist. I mean, he's fine on offense, but he's not going to take a high volume of shots for you. And they're saying we want Porzingis, a guy who will take a high volume of shots for us. Considering how stagnant and bad their offense has been in the playoffs at times, I don't necessarily fault them for trying to do something like this, but I'm kind of with you. I'm not sure this is the exact move that was going to fix that problem.
Yeah, I mean, so they turned Marcus Smart into Drew Holiday, which I think that's good. I think that's a good upgrade. Like, we liked Marcus Smart, but I think wasn't great. And in terms of being like, he was never a star player. He was a good player. And even if we think, defensive player of the year worthy, wasn't going to hurt as much as other players. We were really worried about Rob Williams. My complaint with Rob Williams is even if you don't think he can stay healthy, he is so darn cheap. You could just leave him on the bench.
That's
so
right. That's right.
When I actually talked with Ben Guest a little bit about this, and like the question we had is like, was Rob Williams mandatory for this trade? Could you have left Rob Williams out of it? and still got Drew Holiday. Who knows? That's the other question. So if we look at
Considering
the
Portland is saying they're going to keep him, maybe not.
so I mean that gets interesting for Portland about what happens there. I mean, somebody on the Twitter feed was just like maybe the Nuggets for Rob Williams. It's like, man, I'm salivating at the idea that could be a possibility. So the Celtics, though, I think they just got worse than last year. Now, what could happen? I mean, there's a possibility here. I think you and I did this when we were kind of looking over Jaylen Brown, which is to say, I think it is possible, especially if you've now got Kristaps Porzingis, who's a little bigger. If Jaylen Brown plays a little smaller, which also seems less likely though now that you're getting Drew Holiday, Jaylen Brown has the toolkit, right, to be a decent player. And actually, but the other issue is Jaylen Brown actually is getting called a small forward already, so there's not much to be done there. But like Jaylen Brown forgot how to shoot threes last year, so Jaylen Brown could remember how to shoot threes, and then Drew Holiday, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown is a pretty decent backcourt, and then Kristaps Porzingis is below average, but if he can play close to average, it's fine. I'm really worried about Horford's age, and then now losing Brogdon and Williams off the bench. Like, I think people don't realize that was part of the Celtics' secret sauce is Rob Williams and Malcolm Brogdon off the bench were really, really good. And so now they don't have depth. So let's do one quick thing here, Brian, to give the hot take on Boxscore Geeks. First, I got to verify I'm a human, Brian. All right, I'm not going to do that. I forgot I have a proxy up, so I cannot.
We got you. You're not.
I can't check FanDuel because I just want to see like betting odds, Celtics 2024 wins. I'm curious what they're currently at now. The odds to win a title, that's ridiculous. Yeah, I'll take a look at the over under in the near future because that's my clear my clear question is just like what's the number of wins? Because if people think that the Celtics are going to win more wins than last year, I think that's wrong.
And that makes sense, right? If you're saying the team is going to have less depth, because depth is what helps with regular season wins. For what it's worth, Arturo, our resident Celtics super fan, or former resident anyway, I didn't see his full analysis if he liked the trade or not, but he says his newest simulation, 58 wins, he still likes the Celtics.
I can't do 58.
That's
wins,
a big number.
They were 57 last year, and I don't think they've gotten better.
Okay.
So
interesting.
So I'm going to say below 55 of the Celtics. I did the same. I think this last year what was really frustrating is I bet the under on the Celtics and it was 56 and a half and they got 57 wins. Thanks a lot, Tatum. I took it personally, but you know what? You lost to the Heat. The Heat lost to my Nuggets, so all is forgiven. The Celtics. Jaylen Brown is one of my new favorite players, Brian.
But this is one of those classic NBA questions. I think almost anyone would say Drew Holiday's the best player between him, Smart, and Brogdon. But would you rather have Smart and Brogdon versus Holiday when you could play Smart and Brogdon together even on the court? I don't have a good answer to that. That's a tough call.
Now, what could happen, by the way, is if Williams is completely shot, like let's say hypothetically his cartilage is completely gone and he's just, out of the league, I'll probably be more sympathetic to the Celtics because that could be the other thing is they might, we're kind of just saying, feeling bad about it, but noting the Celtics could really just say, we're just going to play the wheels off of Rob Williams because he's so inexpensive. And, the kind of metaphor that aligns with should make you feel bad. But if the Celtics basically have gone, he's done what he can. And if the Portland Trailblazers are even cognizant of that and just going, yeah, we just need him, we just need a warm body for the season. We're rebuilding. That might line up because something that people do forget when we're analyzing NBA trades is NBA teams have to have a salary floor. You have to have a certain amount of money on the books. And then you also have to have assets that you can trade for other players if you want around. So like Rob Williams at $8 million a season is a perfectly reasonable trade asset and or playable player for your team. So there is not, or I guess 11 million. Good job, Rob Williams. A little more than that. He's at about 12 million a season for the next 3 years.
Here's my speculation about how all this went. Celtics said to themselves, look, we need to bring in Porzingis. Williams being out really hurt it. It might have cost us the Warriors season, the fact that he wasn't healthy. And then once they bring in Porzingis, Williams says, "Well, Celtics, I'm not the guy here, then, right?" And they're like, "Yeah, okay, I guess we'll trade you."
Yeah,
So
which is what it is. It's not great. And then the frustrating part that I will end with is almost the exact same take we ended up with. It's much harder now with no Williams, but the Celtics were above a 50-win team last year, above a 55-win team. And pretty much the funny thing is the Celtics were the only full season, regular season team that looked like a contender. I would argue the Nuggets and the Lakers were completely different squads come playoff time than they were the regular season. The Nuggets finally having a healthy Jamal Murray, finally having a healthy Michael Porter Jr., right? Chris Braun or Brown. I want to call him Braun over Brown.
yep.
But yeah, the Brown brothers. I miss you, Bruce. The Brown brothers looking great. Like the Nuggets were top to bottom the best playoff seed, best healthy playoff seed. The Lakers, right, did that complete shakeup at the trade deadline. So the Celtics, though, at a +6 SRS last season, top to bottom, only good team. Rob Williams was injured a lot of that season, so you can't even say, hey, losing him this year is going to cost him a ton of wins relatively. We think Drew Holiday is an upgrade from Marcus Smart and still offers defense. Kristaps Porzingis is not great. I'm trying to think though, what was who was there for last year? Let's take a look. What was the, because it was obviously Al Horford.
They played Horford and Williams together a little bit, which was
A little.
interesting.
Yeah, but I'm just
But
trying.
there's another guy in there. I mean, of course, there's what's his name, the Eclipse, Luke Cornett. But
we
he
do. Yeah, it was Grant Williams.
Oh, that's right, Grant Williams. He got shipped out also.
So I mean, here's the thing. Let's take a quick shot. Grant, are you aware of this, Brian? So here's the thing. Grant Williams, interesting. We might have to update our Boxscore Geeks numbers because we have him listed as a small forward for Boston last year, but he was basically below, like he was Kristaps Porzingis level. So if we are taking a look at the Celtics and basically saying, okay, well, what happened to their power forward from last year? So their power forward, Luke Cornett, 800 minutes. He's still on the squad as a center, so they keep him around. You know, the Eclipse, we love it. Rob Williams, 800 minutes as well. Not 6 wins, which is really good, but again, replace that with an average player. That's still down to 2. Al Horford, 1,900 minutes. He's the scary one because not good. Mike Muscala below average. Noah Vonleh below average. Blake Griffin, 565 minutes, basically at Kristaps Porzingis' level. Samuel Hauser, about average, and I'm not sure if he's still on the team. Grant Williams, about 2,000 minutes, but we call him a small forward because of the other minutes. So it's like the reality is Kristaps Porzingis is not significantly worse than who was getting played at the power forward position last year. Even losing Rob Williams, if Luke Cornett gets a bump, that's only a couple wins. So basically, doing the analysis on it, I think the Celtics are worse than last year, but it might only be a couple of wins. And so the real question is, can Tatum be an MVP in the playoffs? If Tatum can be an MVP in the playoffs, this team is a contender. So this is so funny, and this actually aligns with the point I have made, which is in the NBA, if you don't have a Dre and Brian star, the good news about Rob Williams is I get to do both. Basically, the NBA is run by Dre and Brian stars, meaning you need a player that's going to be a monster for you in the regular season and a monster for you in the playoffs, and that is what is required to win in the NBA. And the trades for those players are the ones that matters. And if the trade does not involve a player of that caliber, really does not matter. And so with that being said, the Celtics could still have that. I'm just doing a quick look at the number of I'm looking at Jason Tatum in the playoffs last season, 24.5 points per 48 minutes. Let's look at his shooting. 60.7 true shooting in the playoffs. Remember, he had that like stinker of a game and then came back and put like a 50. He averaged 9.5 rebounds in the playoffs per 36 minutes, 4.7 assists. Jason Tatum can be your star. We've seen it. He's got that ceiling. And the Celtics are still I would say conservatively a 53-win team and can easily, like, as much as I was like, you got to bet the under, unless the under is 60, I think if the Celtics over under is near 55, you actually have to leave it alone.
Mm. Yeah, that seems right. And, one big thing is they're going to depend on Derek White to pick up a lot of those minutes too in the backcourt.
And
He
I
really
like
emerged.
Derek White.
Yeah, he
I
emerged in the
really hope Derek
playoffs,
White.
and they're going to say, yeah, we can trade 2 point guards for one, Drew Holiday, and then we still have Derek White. And, yeah, man,
I am
it's
loath
funny.
to do this because I always joke that Arturo has rose-colored glasses when it comes to his Celtics. I think his 58 is actually. I've talked by looking at this. Derek White, just really good player, Colorado player. CU man, maybe he can talk to Deion Sanders to get some tickets because I hear the value of those has gone up. Really good player that looked good last season. If he can keep it up or even close to it, he's fine. We got Derek White. You got Drew Holiday, who's an upgrade now. Luke Cornett getting more minutes potentially. I think this team could hit 58. And then if Jason Tatum can play like he did last season in the playoffs, that's what you need. Yeah, I think the Celtics are. Uh, I think the Celtics should be considered the favorite coming out of the East, honestly. But it should be them and the Bucks in the conference finals, right?
Mm.
Actually, now I'm going to go with the Bucks. I'm going to go with the Bucks because Giannis. You picked the highest spade.
Go
So
with the best player. Yeah,
yep,
yeah.
Giannis. I'm calling it now. Bucks versus Celtics in the conference finals. Going with the Bucks. Calling it now. And I have no idea out west. I mean, candidly, I think the Nuggets lucked into their title last year. They did not look like a traditional team that wins it. 53 wins does not traditionally win an NBA final unless you have a player like Dwayne Wade in 2006, right? Or Nikola Jokic the last 4 years. If you don't have a player that good, you cannot win in the playoffs. So I think the Nuggets may have lucked into it, and I have no idea. Who knows what LA is going to look like. Heck, Portland might be it. I really like Sacramento as a dark horse, by the way, because I think they just got beat up in the playoffs.
Oh.
I love Sacramento. I thought Sacramento was my dark horse pick for the finals last year, and then De'Aaron Fox broke his hand, and Steph Curry's mean. Steph Curry is so mean, Brian.
Speaking of teams that are all offense, I mean, yeah. So what we're talking about the Bucks and Boston is they've given up some depth to maybe chase a higher ceiling. I mean, got to roll the dice, right? You gotta make something happen with your roster sometimes, and shuffling the deck chairs maybe is not bad necessarily. It's interesting we have all these trades happening that we think are so close, right? That no one's just getting completely swindled like would be the normal thing in the past in the NBA. Like you can tell these teams put a lot of thought into this, and it's really interesting.
I mean, I think like Lillard, much like people were bashing for liking Porzingis, I think is trapped in the past because traditionally what happens is a star player demands a trade, and some team is like, we will give you every draft pick from now until eternity. And people go, oh, what a haul. They got so many picks. And Portland's like, give us players, give us productive players now or no. And of course, Miami is like, would you accept Tyler Hero? And yes, I'm he got paid, right, Brian, right? He's getting, let me take a look at Tyler Hero's contract. Hero's getting paid, so I can't feel that bad at okay, yeah, he's averaging 30 million over the next 4 seasons, Brian. He's going to be well north of 100 million even before his next if he doesn't get a next contract, if this is his last contract in the NBA, he makes well north of 100 million, right? I think 150. So it's like you're fine. So I'm okay with the backlash, and then I know friend of the show Ty Willinghands is mad because if I recall, Tyler Hero was a Wisconsin recruit, and I believe he switched to Kentucky.
What a traitor.
Yeah,
Now
so it's
Hero's one of those guys. I mean, he's a legit 3 point shooter. I mean, he's a really good 3 point shooter, and everyone loves that. He's not great at a lot of other things, and he takes a lot of 2 point shots that he misses. And yeah, I mean, that type of player can get paid, but it doesn't always win you games.
that was wild, by the way. The Drew Holiday versus Lillard. Some people are pointing out that Drew Holiday is a better 3 point shot than Lillard. I do think some of that is volume, right? I saw someone note today that Chris Brown says he wants to average 40% from three this season.
Hmm.
And my 2 cents is that's fine as long as you're taking 10 threes per 48. If you're taking less than that, you're averaging 40, you're not taking enough. So, Drew
Right.
Holiday is averaging less than 7 threes per 48 and does really well. And then his net true shooting is good but not great. Like again, this is modern. It's so wild that this is modern NBA. He really has picked it up because it's 59.2, 59.3, 58.6. He started taking more threes. We'll have to see also like I think Budenholzer, right? That's a lot of him. He's really good with the offense. And so I think he did improve that. But it's funny where people are noting that Drew Holiday is in theory a better 3-point shot by the raw per 40, by the raw percentage but Lillard as an example last season 37.1%, but per 36, the last let's 4 seasons 9.8 per threes per 48, 10.6, 9.7, 11.2. It's like Lillard takes more, and then when you look at Lillard's true shooting, 64.5%. Lillard in the last 4 seasons, the 3 of them that he's been healthy, has averaged over 62% true shooting. So
that's
it's an
really
upgrade.
difficult for a point guard.
That's ridiculous. So I'm excited. I'm excited about Milwaukee. I'm excited about the upcoming season. I already got my finals. I'm not worried if the Nuggets do anything. Hopefully they give Jokic a makeup MVP this season. Anything else, Brian, to end on? Because I know that was basically the Damian Lillard. I called it on Twitter the Damian Lillard Louisiana purchase trade, because like that was how much stuff moved in the NBA when this was all said and done.
Yeah, Devin Vassell got paid by the Spurs today. I think it's 5 years, 146 with 133 guaranteed, something like that. Yeah, he probably got overpaid for his production for sure, but a sub $30 million contract's not going to look very big in a few years. So this could pay off for the Spurs, even though they overpaid him.
Really, I mean, he hasn't looked good yet, but he's at that age where he's supposed to get a little better.
And he was one of the best players in the draft too.
That's interesting. And then here's what has been really rough, and we were kind of making this point about the Spurs, and we don't know that they are the kings of this in reality, which is I would not put it past the Spurs to know how to have their players be less productive. And one of the players I'm trying to remember last season, we talked a little bit about them. Not Stanley Johnson. Just they didn't play great. And then I was kind of shocked when I looked it up. Keldon Johnson, was it? Might have been
Oh,
Keldon
he did not have a
Johnson.
good year.
But that was the point. If you looked at Keldon Johnson was an above average sophomore and junior and was terrible last season, but he was terrible getting 32.2 points per 48 instead of 25.6, and his shooting went from 57.4 to 55.1.
Sounds like the skill curve.
So but I was
Sorry.
arguing, I thought the Spurs were just basically said, hey, look at man, we don't want to win this season, right? We want Wemby. Everybody wants Wemby.
I see.
And they're like, and by the way, we, take a look at the Mavericks. We look right down the road. If we tamper too egregiously, we're going to get fined a lot of money, and that's money that we could be spending on, fancy sodas in the break room. So what we need you to do is to increase your shooting, so people say our young prospect is looking great, and shoot from these positions. So I have to wait and see what the Spurs look like when they're trying to win, because as funny as it is, and as much as I hate them for it, the only example of a successful tanking team in NBA history, and I still argue it was accidental. I've looked at the stats here on this. Basically, David Robinson got injured. He tried to come back. He got injured again, and they wound up with Tim Duncan. And I actually have some cards behind me to try and get a Tim Duncan rookie card, which would be awesome. But they tried to do that, and they succeeded. And that is like the one case in NBA history. The tank for Tim Duncan is the one case of it working, in my opinion. So no team knows how to tank. So if they successfully tank for Wembanyama, and then all these players that had an off year last year suddenly start playing productively, and they sign one more good player, we'll see. I'm not excited about Vassell, but it is freaking baffling, Brian. You're not wrong that, as you pointed, a sub $30 million contract. He is a below average, close to average player, but below 30 million, like it starts getting like, yeah, it doesn't really matter. And like what I was saying about other players, like you need contracts you can trade. And at over, whatever we're getting to on the salary cap, that might be fine.
Yeah, I like this deal a lot more than, say, Jordan Poole on the Washington Wizards.
Well, I mean, we'll see. We'll see if Poole has a turnaround.
Yeah, I hope so.
All
He
right,
he
Brian.
remarked today at Media Day, Dre, that he liked the green parks in Washington D.C. So that was a good comment.
Hmm. Hmm.
He liked the vegetation.
It's been a nice place. I will throw this out, and I really hope I see Lillard at some point. Lillard, Appleton, Wisconsin. I'll throw this out. Damian Lillard, October 15th, 2 weeks. The Fox. I actually have the commercial. I'm going to give a couple of commercials, Brian, but let's see. It'll show up on air.
Yep.
So at Neuroscience Field, there is a sports card show going on in 2 weeks, October 15th. So Damian Lillard, if you want to do that, so I get an excuse to see you. And I just destroyed the autofocus in my camera doing that, Brian. Sorry. Um, that would be cool. Appleton, Wisconsin's a chill place. I'm a big fan of Wisconsin. And here's the sad reality, Brian, is climate change has made us a lot more temperate. My
Oh.
wife just popped her head in. Like, here's the funny thing going forward in the future, like Wisconsin, I hear horror stories about the winters, and I've looked them up, historical, and I've been like, they're not so bad. And then I have to go like exact same point. Like the theme of this show might be like inflation. It's like 2002 Wisconsin winters. Oh my gosh, how can you move west east to do them? 2023, they're not that bad, which is scary. So welcome Damian Lillard, welcome to Wisconsin. Try a Kringle, they're good.
Yeah, he's a West Coast guy. That's right. We'll see how that goes. Get him
All
some
right.
parkas, Dre, some winter gear.
But you don't even I have not. That's what's scary. Like my first couple of years out here, I got like really nice jacket, fleece lined pants you can buy at Menards. Those are really nice to get. I got fancy boots. It has not been that bad in the last couple of winters. I have not needed to wear that. I might have just gotten more used to it, right? Where I can go out in the winter with not as dressed up, but it has not been that bad. Do definitely invest. Oh, I mean, yes, this is advice that Damian Lillard needs to take. Don't Larry Bird it, Damian Lillard. Never mind. I was about to say definitely invest in a snowblower because we will get a couple of big snows where you do need to like have a good snowblower to plow through it. They're not getting as rough, and then like a nice gas snowblower is really good. I'm fairly certain at 200 million over the next 4 seasons that Damian Lillard will not be the one doing any snow plowing in his garage.
That's right.
All right, Brian. Well, we'll see what we're back for frequency. I do like biweekly. It puts a little less pressure, but we're back. We're back officially. I'll try and be back writing. We'll see what tools get developed for this year. That is kind of on the purview, but we'll also see whatever. We both had teams that made it really far in the playoffs last year, Brian. I guess we're mortal enemies again because the Nuggets Warriors are fighting again. But it's always good because whenever one of the Warriors or Nuggets triumphs the other goes on to win a title. So we should be happy. If the Nuggets and Warriors are fighting each other in the playoffs, it means titles are coming. So let's hope.
There you go. That's right. That's right.
All right. I do have one shout out, which is for whatever reason, Jamal Murray has shown up in overrated discussions. And I'm just like laughing and going, Jamal Murray is not overrated. And Jamal Murray, as much as I have been someone to bash his regular season production, if I am in the NBA, I do not want to see Jamal Murray in the playoffs. Playoff Jamal Murray is freaking scary. And I love that he's on the Nuggets. I'm glad he's on our side. So shout out to Jamal Murray. Here's looking forward to another long playoff run. This has been the Box Score Geek Show. If you found us, any shout outs from you, Brian, or should I head into just?
Nah, we already talked about it. WNBA Finals, the two best teams. We've been getting some big blow ups in the WNBA playoffs so far. So maybe we'll have a competitive one for once.
All right. Here's hoping. All right. So, and yeah, what was it like 3 or 4? We had like a 5 game, which was nice. But yeah, the last couple have not been good. All right. Anyway, if you found us not to the website, you can find stats and statistics, Brian, both, all the stats you can want at boxscoregeeks.com. You can find myself on most social medias as Nerd Numbers. You can find Brian Foster as B Foster on Blue Sky. Box Score Brian on Twitter. And then, of course, you can find the Box Score Geek Show any place podcasts are found. And then you can check out channel Nerd Numbers on YouTube and on Twitch. That's where we go live when we record these, usually every other week. We're going to have to shape it. We're going to have to mix it up this year. So Wednesday is out, but it'll be Monday or Tuesdays this year, Brian, usually around 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And the last shout out I'll give is the last episode of the Nerd Podcast, which Brian has guested on over at Jeff Has Cool Fence has dropped. Brian, you'll be shocked to hear this. I did it on a chess movie. I did it on Searching for Bobby Fischer.
Oh, that's a
Because
good movie.
you know how much I like chess.
Joe
So,
Mantegna, what a boss.
oh my God, we give Joe Mantegna
Ben
a lot.
Kingsley.
That movie is so, yeah, and this is in the episode, Brian. It's almost like you heard the episode, because that we talk a lot about the insane cast of Searching for Bobby Fischer. But over at patreon.com/Jeff May, you can find it for free. But if you help support it, that is the Nerd Podcast, which we like. And then of course you can find us at boxscoregeeks.com. I'll throw that out one more time. I've been checking the numbers a lot to see how these trades have gone down. We'll see you probably in 2 weeks, and we'll see what the season does for more than that. Talk to you next time.